So my presentation is oncology clinical trials in Africa. Of course, my intention is to tell us what are the usefulness of running clinical trials in oncology clinical trials, what are the challenges in the continent, and what are our recommendations for beating down those challenges to ensure that we have increased volume of clinical trials coming into the continent. To preempt this meeting, for which I was chosen to talk on oncology clinical trials in Africa, I actually did a webinar on Monday, the 6th of February, and I had a global attendance of over 150 participants, and I had about 9 speakers taken from CROs, clinical research organizations, industry, as well as clinical research associates who are primarily principal investigators in different universities who have played a significant role in oncology clinical trials, representing across board the Nigerian Cancer Society, the CAPTC, the Union for International Cancer Control, LTIC, and quite a number of other organizations, the Nigerian Medical Association as well. This event has actually firmed up my resolution that the only way Africa can scale itself and take the rightful position to own their development, their economy, and their improve the infrastructure of healthcare across board, not just for cancer, is to work together, to work collaboratively together, speak with one voice, take decisions on a continent scale, and abide by those decisions across board. For clinical trials, the efforts that would, or the effect of that effort would be that across board, sponsors will come and meet the same challenges, meet the same infrastructure, and be able to work with the continent more. And that will help us to increase the volume of clinical trials in the continent, not just for oncology clinical trials, because we need it across board. We need the genetic makeup of our population to be involved in, or taken into consideration in the whole development of drugs that are utilized by population in the continent. It's not a one-cap-fits-all, especially in these days when we know about precision medicine. There's no way Africa can play in that role of participating in precision medicine if our population is not involved in the clinical trial process. So this is very imperative. This is also very imperative for our patient population that are paying out of pocket significantly. You find that in clinical trials, in high-income countries, you find that patients are able to have themselves recruited into studies and are being matched against gold standard drugs on the ongoing drug that is undergoing trials. So you have over 80% to 88% of patients in high-income countries recruited into studies and not paying for the cost of high oncology drugs. But that is not the case here. Just a few clinical trials in oncology are available. So for instance, there's one that is able to give people treatment access to Herceptin, which is very, very expensive. And a lot of patients who are on it in that trial would never have been able to afford it. And they probably would have lost their lives because that is actually the gold standard for treatment for the type of cancer that they have. And we have that also playing out in an oncology study that took place about 5 years ago. Quite a lot of attestations by patients saying that this was what gave them the life that they still have. Without it, I mean, how could you be paying over $500,000 for one session of chemotherapy? But they were able to do it because that drug was on trial and was actually being done in Nigeria. So Nigeria is just one country. There are 52 countries in the continent. But what we are saying is if we improve the clinical trial infrastructure of the African countries through creating clinical trial units that will give confidence to the pharmaceutical companies that there will be high standards of maintenance of GCP, then the sponsors will have more confidence in slating clinical trials in the continent. And there are some other things that I want to propose, a lot of trainings based on even improving the data that is coming out from the continent. So we need to train not only already generated staff in the universities or the health sector, but we need to train from students. If you give that background to students, you'll find that they'll be more innovative, more creative, and they'll be doing more studies and be generating data that are germane to the population and not extrapolated data such as we use to talk about what is happening in the continent. The thing I want to add is that the onus is not just on those in healthcare. It's not only on those in academia. We need the heads of states of our countries. We need to improve the political will. We need to improve their knowledge base for them to understand the critical reason why the African continent should be significantly engaged in the clinical trial process as a way to actually move us forward, both in our healthcare infrastructure setting, but also it will improve the economy of the continent, because clinical trials is a huge industry.